I'm not sure if it's a helpful analogy for everyone, but it came to mind, so I'm going to share it anyway. This past week, I was watching a new series from Star Trek. It's called Picard. It's a story of Jean-Luc Picard, Captain Picard, played by Patrick Stewart, and his adventures in this new iteration of the Star Trek franchise. I'm sad to admit that I got through about a season and a half in about a week and a half, which means I wasted too many hours each evening watching this. But Picard in this series begins by being a simple vineyard keeper. He's taken up a quiet life after his adventures in Starfleet, and he's simply growing grapes, making wine, going about his, what we would say is very ordinary life. But in the midst of that ordinary life, Picard begins to have dreams, begins to feel a restlessness within his heart, within his life, within this existence that he's entered into. So much so that, people begin to appeal to him for help, and he responds. And then a new adventure seems to be presenting itself, whereby not only he has to travel to the city, but he's going to go to the other side of the earth. And then from the other side of the earth, he gets on a starship, and all of a sudden he's out in the galaxy again, and the adventure ensues. But it begins with this sort of restlessness in his life, this attentiveness to what's happening in his heart, what's going on, what the needs are. I couldn't help but think of that because I think that's where we are in this Synod process that we've been speaking about for some weeks. We spent the last weeks reflecting in our ordinary lives what it means to encounter, what it means to listen, both to our own experience of life, of God, and also to one another's. As we enter this final week of reflection, the theme that is before us is discernment. How do we decide what is next? How, like Picard, do we see what is important in my life at this moment? What am I maybe being called to do? We all undertake discernment in many ways in our lives. We all need to discern between what is right and wrong, what fits for us and what does not, given our state in life and many other circumstances. But to discern also is to not just decide for ourselves what is right and wrong, but indeed to invite God into that process, to ask ourselves not just what do we want as individuals or as a community, but what is God inviting us into? Discernment is open for us in our gospel this weekend. And there's a few passages in which questions are being asked of Jesus. It might seem obscure to us. They're dealing with the tragedy of some of the Galileans and Pilate. But Jesus is asked questions about this particular thing. And as he's asked questions, he responds with a very clear answer. In both cases, happens to be the answer is no. No, I tell you. And he goes on to explain himself. And often we want that in our own discernment, don't we? We want to be able to speak to the creator of the universe, the one who understands the depths of our lives, and to say, are you calling me to this? Is this what I'm supposed to do? And we want yes, we want no. Sadly, that's not how easy discernment truly is. Discernment is what we hear at the end of the gospel today, wherein Jesus gives this parable of the fig tree that is planted in the vineyard, this fig tree that is bearing no fruit. Indeed, the owner of the vineyard wants to cut it down. But the gardener begs him, let me do what I can to bring fruit from this tree. And then next year, if it still continues to bear no fruit, then we will cut it down. First of all, notice that this fig tree is planted in the midst of a vineyard. A vineyard is for grapes. Why is there a fig tree in the middle of it? This is something that seems to stand out, something that doesn't seem to make sense. And so it's ordinary for the owner of the vineyard to say, take this away. It's wasting the soil from the grapes. It's taking us away from the one thing that is important for us. But see that the gardener is attentive to say, maybe something different is happening here. Maybe something new is possible with this fig tree. It's very clear those things can rise up in our own encountering and listening to one another. That something might stand out that doesn't seem to fit into place, something doesn't seem to work. How can we have this and this together? They don't match up. But the gardener points out this need for us to discern, to do what we can to nourish, to see if fruit is possible in this particular thing in our lives, the fig tree and the gospel. And that's an important part of discernment, to see what is happening in our midst, the questions that are before us, to do our best to provide good soil, and then to pay attention to the fruit that that particular thing, struggle, question, circumstance brings about in our lives. And if it doesn't bear fruit, then yes, it should be cut down. Then yes, we shouldn't move in that direction. But if it bears fruit, begins to take on new life, maybe something is changing here. Our lives as a community of faith here at Canadian Martyrs McMaster is so permeated with this reality of discernment. All of our lives should be. I think so obviously for us as a community, how we accompany young people as they're entering into their adult lives, as they are discerning what God is inviting them into, what their own hearts are longing for, relationships with one another, and not just the careers that they choose, but the paths by which they don't just seek to get ahead in this world, but seek to live good, upright, holy lives. Discernment is part of all of our lives. Not just at those pivotal moments, but every moment of the day in which we're trying to understand what's going on within our hearts. We're trying to encounter, to listen to ourselves and to those around us. And we're always being called to make decisions to move in certain directions. Sometimes it can become difficult or uncomfortable. Sometimes it seems very natural and easy. But we need to be a people of discernment. It's been asked over the past weeks, even after speaking about it for 3 weeks, what is this synod all about? Maybe I haven't done such a good job over the past 3 weeks, but people are still asking, what is the synod? And what is this synod all about? The synod is all about being willing to encounter our own individual lives and Christian experience, and that of the community of faith as one church, in a different way. And the Pope is inviting us to think about our lives as connected to what we experience spiritually. And that as we encounter, as we listen, as we discern, it's not just for one moment in our life. It's not just for one exercise as a church, as a synod, but it affects everything that we say, do, and are. And just as one learns best by doing, that's what the Pope is inviting us into. If we are going to be a people of encounter and listening and discernment, that we need an opportunity to do that together as a church. And that there's fruits that are going to come from this experience. The questions that are on our hearts, the things that we hear one another say, the change that perhaps happens in us because of that experience. This all is very, very important. In some ways, I feel like it's Canadian martyrs, but Pastor, we are on the cutting edge of this. For years, we have been discerning. For years, we've been listening. For years, we've been encountering one another in a deeper way. Think back to the early years of my pastorship here, when we had the one flock, one shepherd, 1 hour together. It was 6 years ago that we did that as a church, which is this synodality that the church is inviting us into. Now we have the opportunity as a community of faith to contribute to what is being said throughout the diocese. We have the opportunity to be able to convey to our Holy Father in Rome these ways in which the Spirit is living and active in our midst. And I encourage you to be honest, forthright, challenging in what you bring to the Synod next week. Because we need to encounter, to listen, to discern, to everything that God is doing, many ways that God is moving within us. The Holy Father, in his section on discernment, his own homily, says, encountering and listening are not ends in themselves, leaving everything just as it was before. He says, on the contrary, whenever we enter into dialogue, we allow ourselves to be challenged, to advance on a journey. And in the end, we are no longer the same. We are changed. It's that change the discernment is able to bring about. This weekend in the pews, you'll see little slips of paper that are an invitation to take part in next weekend's Synod Sunday. That is after this 11:30 Mass. We'll have some small groups together down in the hall or in the student center and spread out throughout the church. And we're asking for you to let us know, if you'll be attending, how many of you will be joining in this. And this is a unique opportunity. Don't let it pass you by. Don't think, I love going out for my Sunday breakfast after Mass, and this is a little inconvenient. Maybe Sister Mary will bring us some Timbits or something to keep us satisfied. This is the opportunity to let your voice be heard. There's also an online session, and that's where it's most important that you RSVP so that we can send you the Zoom link that'll be on a week Tuesday. We really hope you will participate. There's a QR code on that invitation, and you can scan that with your smartphone. That's actually our preference if you're able to do it. So you might give the same reply. I'm attending, this is the number of people that are coming, or please send me the Zoom link. Here is my email address. So please fill that out by the end of Mass today, or just before you leave. You can drop it in the basket, or just, as I say, do it online using the QR code that also can be found on that sheet of paper. The Holy Father ends his homily in these words, and so I leave you with them. Dear brothers and sisters, let us have a good journey together. May we be pilgrims in love with the gospel and open to the surprises of the Holy Spirit. Let us not miss out on the grace-filled opportunities born of encounter, listening, and discernment, in the joyful conviction that, even as we seek the Lord, he always comes with his love to meet us first.